Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com where music comes to life. And my guest today is just one of my favorite people to talk to. He's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame guitarist from his time in Genesis, and he's about to release his 30th solo album on February 16th, a concept record called The Circus and the Night Whale. Plus, with this interview, he becomes only the second artist to appear on this site 5 times. It is always an honor to talk to Mr. Steve Hackett. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you. Once again, thank you.
So, before we get into the actual story behind the circus and the night whale, this is the
Yep.
first time in 30 solo records that you've done a concept album. Have you purposely stayed away from sort of that old progressive rock trope of a concept record, or have you just not had the desire to do one?
Well, I was thinking about doing something that had a narrative thread to it and was autobiographical. And I know that some people are engaged by the term concept, and others are turned off by that. Because it's easy to do something that people might think is a little overblown and really, we're interested in individual tracks. But once the idea came up, and I was talking to my wife Jo about this, we wrote the stuff together. She came up with the title of the album because we were kicking on circus and what have you, and I very much liked the title, and I thought it was intriguing. And then, in order to sort of deliver something that was intriguing, I thought it needed to have an intriguing start to the album. So we started with excerpts from radio from 1950, the year I was born. This is the way radio sounded. This is the way people spoke. The BBC had a lady announcer for a program called, I think it was called Listen with Mother. And she would say, "Are you sitting comfortably?" And then there'd be a long pause. "And now I'll begin," or "then I'll begin." And instead of letting her get that far, we had a baby's cry that's obviously uncomfortable to create, the paradox, and then extending the baby's cry to sound a little bit like a train whistle. Then a train arrives, and when that gets up to speed, the train, pace comes the guitar, but sounded better with strings doing it. Then a rock band taking on from that. So all these things, these sort of multi-layered or false starts, are what characterized the beginning of the album and gave me a way to frame it. So it didn't sound like an ordinary album. It didn't go straight in with, "Here comes the power chord, guys. That's it. You're a guitarist. That's what you do." It just allowed us to go somewhere else from the word go. These various decoys. When is it going to start? Is this what it does? Is it a classical album? Is it a nostalgic thing? Is it this, that, is it industrial? And so, we had all those elements that reappear during the course of the song, People of the Smoke. And The Smoke is a title that it was a nickname, polluted place. People referred to it as the Smoke. That was London, a bit like the Big Apple for New York. The Smoke was that. So People of the Smoke is about Londoners, and about that time, London in post-war recovery, heavily bombed, lots of places still falling apart, not enough money to fix them all, heavily polluted. We grew up opposite the Battersea Power Station, which was the largest building in Europe at the time, and it powered half of London, gave us light and heat, but it was a cloud factory. there were 4 huge smokestacks, and when they were belching out fumes, it just went up into the sky, and that grey ash went into our lungs, and it created that grey porridge sky thing. Oatmeal, you guys say, oatmeal sky. That was it. That's what kicked off the thing. Now these days, you can take a journey up inside one of those huge smokestacks. There's an elevator that goes to the top, and then it comes out the top, and you get this 360-degree view of London.
Oh,
it's
wow.
the most exciting journey, and I can look across the river at the apartments, the flats that we grew up in, and there it is, right there. And my between the years 3 and 7 years old, that was my view, and of course, that's what became the most iconic cover for Pink Floyd, Animals, the Flying Pig. It's the building that was part of. That was it. There were no flying pigs, but it was still a monumental thing to gaze at, especially at night. I'd see it smoking away, and the sounds of the barges going, and seeing the neon lights snake through the water, and it used to mesmerize me. I used to stare at the thing for ages, and now it's really part of that song, and it's part of the video that accompanies that song to kick off the album, to set the scene, a kind of film for the ear, and it was as if I was trying to come up with something, an imaginary film, and I was trying to come up with a soundtrack that might accompany this imaginary film. And that idea went through all the songs that were on the album, so they were largely all written to order like that. A self-commission.
And again, as you mentioned, this is somewhat of an autobiographical story in some ways, but talk a little bit about the protagonist in the story, and also the title too, because I think the title's pretty captivating. Where does the circus and the night whale come in with the story?
Ever since I joined the music business as a professional, I realized I was involved in a traveling circus. So rock and roll is a circus. The night whale is another aspect. My wife and I, we were thinking of stories that used the whale and being swallowed up by it. We were thinking of Jonah, we were thinking of Pinocchio, we were thinking of all of these ideas and heroic journeys and everything, and making a leap of faith, as indeed does Pinocchio. And it's facing your fears. And it's also the, people have used the expression, the dark night of the soul, when you are most troubled and you're close to a nervous breakdown. That's what I wanted to convey with the idea of the night whale. Literally, it reminds me of when I was an adolescent, and I used to get this feeling of something sitting on me, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't move. And I was thinking that, when circumstances literally grind you to a halt, or you've got to say, hell with this, I've got to be myself, I've got to be free, I must have autonomy. And that came into my life in several different stages. One stage it came in was when I was in Genesis, but then I was suddenly being prevented from working outside of Genesis with a parallel solo career. And that was a very difficult decision to make, to leave what was arguably, I thought, the world's best band, but without, I had no guarantees that my creative ideas would be used. That wasn't on offer, but they wanted to change my status from being a full partner to being an employee. And that really rankled with me. So Autonomy. It comes back to that. And then later in my life, I was in another situation, which was both a personal and a management situation, which became very claustrophobic and was really grinding me to a halt and very much getting me down. And there was also my relationship with Joe, as my second marriage was falling apart, and Joe and I were becoming closer and closer. We had a work relationship first of all, and but you know, we had a wonderful marriage of ideas, and I needed to have that. And she, when I did my autobiography, I did the book. She's a writer. She's written books. She's made films, done various things, and she, in a way, was largely responsible for the. I say, you know, there was self-commissioning going on, but also they said to me, "You've got to have a thread. You've got to be able to do this. You've got to be able to do that, in order to make it work." And of course, she knows me very well. She knows the ups and downs that I've had, and it was quite a few years before I was really, or we were able to establish ourselves as a couple, in the face of you know, quite a lot of complication and mixed business interests and what have you. But it had to happen. So quite a few of the tracks, they are love songs that are dedicated to her. But I like to think that there's a paradox, because if you've got a rock song, normally a rock song is not a love song. It's with what's wrong with the girl, devil woman, and all that. Well, she's completely the opposite. You know, she's been my guiding light for years now, and so I wanted to be able to honor that with certain things. So there's the paradox in the song. For instance, the second song to be released as a single is "Wherever You Are." I really wrote that about her. You know, that she's such an expansive person, so generous, and light literally shines out of her at times, I think, and it seems as if there's a whole sort of universe there that goes on. So that's why the song is both personal and universal, and indeed talks about universal themes and also spiritual themes as well, and the idea of hopefully love surviving. I might sound very romantic here and very dreamy, but I do believe there's a world of spirit, and I do believe we do shine on, as John Lennon said.
Yeah, 100%. And again, lyrically, as you mentioned, there's a strong autobiographical component, but I think musically there is in this record as well, in that it encompasses everything I think you've done in your career, in that there's, you know, the prog element, something like Enter the Ring, the beautiful classical flourishes like the beginning of Found and Lost, and then the hard rock stuff like Taking You Down and People of the Smoke. So I think it's a biography of you musically as well. It's almost like you're telling your story both lyrically and musically in it.
Well, I think it's nice that you've said that. Yes, I think that's true. So it's a kind of companion piece to the book, and I think that sometimes you can say things musically, even if it's something that's just instrumental. Music is many things. Of course, it's a healer. It's the language of the heart. Music is a thing that, when you're watching a movie and you might just have a still of something, that the music is the thing that sets the tone. It's telling you that there's either a threat or it's something peaceful. Right at the beginning of Angel Heart, I think the movie, there's something, it's just a nighttime scene, but there's something spooky going on. And without that, you wouldn't have that sense of the film expanding out of the frame that contains it. But, that's it. There's something about film. You don't really want to see the edge of the screen with film. You want something to transcend that. And music is the transcendent language that informs film. So for all filmmakers, the great movies have great music. And to have great music, you need to allow time. Don't keep your composer up all night for 2 weeks and think you're going to have a great score. Given what the Hollywood guys had, Dmitri Tiomkin, Miklas Rosa, Ben-Hur, It's a Wonderful Life, that stuff, where obviously there's been time those guys had those things. I think they were tailor-made. They couldn't have been off the peg. Although I think Max Steiner with Gone with the Wind, I gather he got 3 or 4 different movies at a time and pilled up to the teeth to try and get through. But hey, when Hollywood comes calling, that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do.
Yeah. And as always, you have a really busy touring schedule for 2024, including Foxtrot at 50 gigs here in the US, a tour with Lamb highlights in Europe. Most of it kicks off with Cruise to the Edge. What could people expect from you guys on the cruise?
Well, I'm hoping to include, we're going to rehearsals with some of the new stuff. So the solo half of the show, I think we'll have stuff from Circus and the Night Whale. There'll be some other things as well. The band particularly like playing certain things such as the Devil's Cathedral and Camino Royale. They've become workouts for the band. It's an interesting time. I'm spread very thin with a number of projects at the moment, both acoustic projects live and also visiting Norway, a quick one there to be with Jarby, the fusion band, to do that, the northernmost part of freezing cold Norway. I think it's the furthest town into the Arctic Circle, I believe. So once more, having been to Iceland and being very close to the Arctic Circle, 50 miles from the North Pole, I did a track called that once. So that's an interesting adventure. Hope we get to see the Northern Lights. It's a very, very interesting time. And the response to the album, so far it's been media that's responded. People have not heard the album. They've heard 2 tracks so far. But one of the videos has gone viral and the other one seems to be catching up. When I say viral, in my world, I'm happy if 5,000 people get to listen to something or watch a video. But this time it's 130,000 plus that have been watching People of the Smoke. And the other one is up to something like 80,000, 87,000. So I think the power of the song with the second one, it's finding its audience. So if only I can access a wider audience, it's very easily said, to do that. To penetrate the marketplace to that degree is what it's all about. But at the end of the day, I don't want to make the kind of comments that I know that people do or did at one time, particularly in the 80s, in order to fit the mold. I think it's so important to break the mold because audio has been marginalized so much in favor of visual. So I want to put visual back into audio to be part of the fight back of audio. I find it hugely interesting that there's Atmos, surround, etc. And we'll get to all of those things. We will release in all formats at some point.
And like I said, you start the tour here in the US with the Foxtrot at 50 shows. Is there any plans to bring the Lamb highlights to the US next year?
I think that'll happen next year. First of
Mm,
all, it'll happen see, the thing is, I was advertised to bring Foxtrot, and we've done a 2-month tour of the States doing Foxtrot. But now we're playing in the main. It's entirely new places that I've not
mm,
touched for quite a few years. And but what's on the tin, on the packet, is um,
mm.
is Foxtrot.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to deliver that, because I consider that with Genesis, there's a golden period, 1972 to 73. That's a long time ago. We're talking over 50 years ago,
Yeah.
but somehow it's timeless. Foxtrot meets Selling It by the Pound when they were first touring in America. And John Lennon picked up on the band and said he thought we were true sons of the Beatles, which is a lovely thing for him to have said. And so I'm very proud of those 2 albums back to back. I think it's the golden period for
Yeah.
Genesis. I don't think there's a weak track on
Mm,
Foxtrot. I don't think there's a weak track on Selling England by the Pound.
mm.
For me, those albums are intensely vibrant.
Yeah.
There's just something about it. A young band who were desperate to make it, who hadn't made it at that stage, and were, allowed their first chance to go
Mm.
to the States. All of that is part of it. The excitement that went with that, playing to small audiences, but word of mouth was what was selling Genesis there. Maybe I would be naive to trust in word of mouth now, but I like to think that word of mouth might come into play with something like we have.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, it would be lovely, yes, of course, to have the machinery of an Atlantic Records or even Arista with GTR, of course, to launch it. Inside Out is a smaller company, but they have integrity.
Yes.
They release stuff that they like. Trevor Rabin released stuff on that. Ian Anderson releasing stuff with them. It's hugely interesting. And if there's a sort of Genesis revival of what's classic Genesis, they've funded that and made that possible.
Mm. And I mean, speaking of all of that, now that Genesis is over, Phil is pretty much retired. Peter
Yes.
just put out an absolutely stunning record.
Yes.
Do you ever see yourself doing a project with either Mike or Tony in the future? Is it something that could happen or something that you're just not interested in?
Well, I think I've suggested anything, even if it's as much as, oh, I could get up on stage with you and do a further fifth.
Yeah.
I seem to be turned down lock, stock, and barrel. I was asked to rejoin the band with Peter Gabriel to do Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and to do it as a musical, and then it just all fell apart. I was extremely flexible, and I was hugely enthusiastic. I said, I just come off the back of having done an acoustic tour, and the reaction was stunning to that. And I thought, wow, imagine, if you could put this back together again, Genesis, this would be fantastic. But I sensed a reticence within the rank, and Tony didn't want to do Lamb Lies Down on Broadway as a musical. He thought it was too complicated. So, to find common ground is very difficult for guys who worked together 50 years ago. Do you know what I mean? It's people change, the goalposts have shifted. There is band politics, power play, all of those things. And I think it's a great shame that they haven't been able to, bury differences. So much as I would like to, that would be great. But I don't think it'll happen. I would say I honor the work of Genesis, what I consider to be the best work that I did for Jeff, who playing it, who relish it, and reinvigorate it, rather than to have to be dragged screaming back into the old routine. I don't think that really works. Let's reinvigorate it, reupholster it, revisit it, add instruments, stick an orchestra in there if you like, have a wider thing. When it was classical, give it the works. So that's why I did 2 studio albums of Genesis Revisited. I haven't got any plans to do a 3rd Revisited. At this point, I haven't got any desire to do so, but I like to think that there's future for Genesis inspired stuff, so that the instrumental aspect becomes as important as the song. The aspect of surprise becomes important. The pan-genre approach becomes as important as those, that period that John Lennon liked the band, when all was risk and nothing was certainty.
Well, we've been spending some time here with the one and only Steve Hackett. The record is called The Circus and the Night Whale. It's out everywhere, February 16th. You're on the road through the US in the first part of the year, and then Europe through summer and fall. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Steve. Best of luck with the record.
It's absolutely lovely talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For
Have
your
a good
kind
one.
words. Thank you. You too.